Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. Today's topic of the show is preparing psychologically for retirement. And with us to discuss that is Donna Skeels, Cygan. And Donna, you want to give us a little background about your title. You and I have been planning the show. I saw the article in the Journal probably about 3 months ago.
Right.
And I think that's what piqued my interest. And my wife might have mentioned it to me. Her and I, she knows that I'm always looking for material for the show. But I think when I saw that right away, I told you that I'm looking at retirement in 2 years. People retire every day. So when I saw that, it piqued my interest right away. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, your title, your work? Give us a brief little synopsis.
Sure. I've been a fee-only financial planner for 19 years, almost 20, here in Albuquerque. And I own a firm called Sage Future Financial. And the Albuquerque Journal asked me about 2 years ago to start writing articles for them. And I used to write for them years ago. And then when they asked me again, I jumped at the chance and told them I wanted to make sure I was not paid for that, strictly educational. And so I thoroughly enjoy writing. And I think the article that piqued your interest was preparing psychologically for retirement. And then I followed up with preparing financially for retirement. And I just recently did 2 on the stages, wise financial stages from age 3 to 103. And so I just love to get the feedback from readers of the journal and people who hear me talk or see my writings, get good feedback, and I really try to connect with people on what's practical, not necessarily just financial pornography is what we might call it, which there's way too much of that, too much information, but something that can connect with people where they can really find something that will help them personally.
Well, I think the psychological part is what we're focusing on today.
Right.
We definitely want to have you back on for the financial, because that, again, I guess because I'm looking at it, my wife works for Catholic Charities, and we're hoping to retire at the same time. But as I mentioned to you, I don't look at a moment. For me, I'm 55 and I'm feeling really good still. There'll be a moment where that will happen. But I think at least for me, that's why I wanted to have you on. So I guess one of the first questions we have for you: what does it mean to retire to something rather than retire from something? That's a good question. It's already making me think. So what does that mean?
Well, it's a play on words, but I think it is really pertinent for people facing retirement. And it's from Mitch Anthony, who wrote a book years ago, and he keeps revising it, called The New Retirementality. And he said we need to plan on retiring to something rather than from something. And what he's getting at is the fact that we are so involved in our careers and our work, and our identity is wrapped up in that. And so often we retire and we feel like a fish out of water. We suddenly lost our sense of purpose. And I actually experienced this. I sold a company and thought I would just take a couple of years off, and really missed my work terribly. I wasn't ready, and I wasn't retiring. I was just selling a company. But I understood this firsthand, how painful that can be to lose your sense of identity. And so the planning psychologically on what you're going to do during retirement is just so critical at this point, so that yes, you are losing the camaraderie you may have had in your job and the type of work you did, but you're looking forward to changes that are exciting and challenging and engaging. And so that's where planning the retirement and what you want to do in that next phase of life is so important.
Okay, so it might be different things, and you mentioned camaraderie. Where I work at, we have a whole bunch of that. I'm a real social guy. I like being around people, so I think that's one thing for me. And the sense of identity, man, someone mentioned this to me about a year ago, since I get all these seniors coming in. And this one guy tells me, says, hey, when I retired from the military, I was in charge of 250 people. And when that ended, that all ended. And it's a loss of sense, a loss of power, loss of some of your id, or whatever Sigmund Freud called it.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely is. It was. So maybe talk a little bit more about that. And again, everybody's different. They're going to retire. Some people are going to have the feeling that you did. You just sold a company. I'm already feeling a sense of loss. It's 2 years away. Mm-hmm. Not yet. I think about, So maybe talk about that just a little bit more.
Sure. Well, I think the whole concept of retirement has changed drastically in recent years. So if you look back 40, 50 years, it was common, first of all, generally men had careers and women often did not. So a man might retire at age 65 and get a gold watch. That was the stereotype. And often he would die at 67. So there was this really short period of retirement and not this feeling that this is a major phase of our life. Now we've got people retiring, like you're talking about retiring young, maybe at 57. We've got people retiring at 60 and well before 65 and living to 95. So we've got this 30, 35-year period of retirement to plan for. And I think we do have to plan ahead. I certainly wasn't prepared for it when I sold my company. I was actually writing my book, and I thought I'm going to spend a year writing. I've got teenagers. I can spend more time with them. And it just wasn't what I expected. My teenagers didn't want anything to do with me. They were at that stage of life. It's improved drastically now. But it was just really a challenge for me, and I didn't feel real creative. I wasn't writing a lot, and I just felt like I had lost that sense of purpose, which was my clients. I work very closely with my clients, and they become almost like family. And so now that I've gone through that and I ended up coming back into the business and working again with clients, I understand how difficult it can be if you haven't planned well. So the idea of planning for retirement is first of all, pondering it. I think that's important. You don't just kind of wake up one day and say, okay, I'm no longer going to the office. You have to really ponder, what do you want out of retirement? What do you want that to look like? And then the second phase I talk about is adding some structure. So there's a chart that you can just create on a piece of paper, and it goes from Sunday through Saturday, and then across the top is morning, afternoon, and evening. And I encourage people, it sounds so simple, but I encourage them to write in their exercise first, because staying healthy is the most important thing. So write that in. You know, are you going to go to the health club? Are you going to go walking Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning? And then start building out that schedule. Maybe you want to do some volunteer work, and maybe that's 1 or 2 days a week. Maybe you want to work part-time. Maybe you want to take up a new hobby. You want to go biking, take tennis lessons, whatever it may be. You build out your schedule, and you include things like shopping for groceries and paying the bills, administrative tasks. And suddenly you've got this schedule that is really structured and actually starts to feel good. And you also build in time for leisure time and certainly travel and whatever you may want to do, and meeting friends and family. We know from psychology research that the most important thing in terms of making us happier is spending time with friends and family. And sometimes retirement allows us more time to do that. So it may be if your kids or grandkids are living elsewhere, you plan time to go spend more time with them. All of those things go into it. So that's the structure stage of it. And the third thing that I highly recommend when you're planning retirement is to embrace change. So embracing change is so different than accepting change. It's more emphatic. And you think about, what would I like to do that I've never gotten around to, but I would love to do, and now I'm going to have the time to do that. And that might be a new hobby. That might be taking a painting class or a writing class or learning a new instrument, but it's something that's totally new that takes your focus away from what you used to do in your career, which often is all-consuming. I mean, we work really hard, and now we're going to have a chance to recreate ourselves in retirement. And so all of those stages, I think, are very important.
In different ways. I think you're right. You can, sort of like a bucket list, there's things that you haven't done, and why not do them now if you're financially stable? So I think your health is so important too, because you did mention that when people retired back in the day, and you see that even still sometimes, you know, after. That's why people sometimes get a little worried or concerned about retiring, because they're so used to a routine. But you just mentioned ways to start another routine. And sometimes, you know, there can be fulfillment to that too. Family, friends, grandchildren, travel. You know, my wife and I have always, you know, we'll say that and we'll say, honey, I want to do that, and she'll say that too, but we're both really locked into our careers right now anyway. So why is retirement such a big deal now? How's, you know, you mentioned that. When we start to ponder our retirement, what should we consider?
Well, I think we need to do some soul searching, actually. You know, what is important? What have you never had a chance to do? And volunteer work can be very engaging, and it can be anything. It can be working at a shelter, it can be working at a nursing home, a hospital, a library. But I think people should experiment. We need to make sure that we don't go from a phase of working really hard and being totally consumed by our careers to another phase of giving all of that energy to volunteer work. I really recommend against that, and it's easy for that to happen.
I could see
So
that happen.
I recommend people kind of try different things, see what they really enjoy, and then possibly part-time work, especially if people are not financially secure. When we do retirement projections, if somebody has just a little bit of part-time income, and it doesn't need to be much, it has a huge impact on kind of bridging into retirement, allowing them to retire at the age they want, but not pulling from their investments as much as they would if they didn't have that part-time income. And so even part-time income can be, it doesn't have to be related to your career. I do recommend people kind of take a clean break from their career, try something totally different. And it can be working at Lowe's. It can be doing
Walmart
anything.
greeter.
A Walmart greeter. It can be flipping burgers. It doesn't have to be anything that you would think would be like a career. It just brings in a little bit of income and helps financially bridge you into retirement.
Right, and I think there's a lot of people that don't, pensions, that's why I always say with the city, you know, we're very lucky to have a pension. Very lucky. I always tell city employees that there's really little complaint about working for the government. As far as I'm concerned, you get pretty good benefits, vacation, sick leave, and a pension. So people these days, a lot of people, pensions are going by the way. You know, some companies are totally eliminating those.
Yeah, and pensions will no longer be a mainstay. It used to be you knew you had your pension, and you knew you had Social Security, and the third leg of that stool was from your investments that you had saved, maybe a 403B, 401K, or any kind of investment that you have.
A CD back in the day.
Right.
I remember, I don't think they even do those anymore, but I'm not sure, but I remember those.
Oh, yeah.
So there's, I think with retirement, there's also issues, financial issues. You know, I don't know if you want to get into that now, but I think, you know, just been planning, there's so many things to consider, and I think that's why, at least, and I guess I wanted to ask you too, are more people planning or retiring through your studies, earlier, younger, later? What's the average retirement age now? Is there an age that there people are an average retirement at? I mean, are they retiring at 65, later? Are they pushing back retirement?
I see a difference between people who have a pension and people who do not. And so you really touched upon an important topic with pensions becoming like dinosaurs. They're really going away quickly. So government employees and any kind of corporations that still have a pension, those are very, very rich. And you are fortunate. So it's wonderful. The younger generation is not going to have that. I think right now government is still providing it for new employees, but a lot of the corporations are phasing it out. So
interesting.
Yeah,
that really is.
Unfortunately. And so I guess for people with pensions, you know, I don't know the studies and what they say, but I do know a lot of pensions start paying at 60 and sometimes even younger, and so we'd see that commonly. For people who don't have a pension and they're relying on Social Security and their savings and maybe they haven't saved enough, we're seeing 65. And then there's actually this kind of wave coming through of saying maybe you don't ever want to retire, maybe you want to go to part-time, maybe you want to continue with your career on a part-time basis. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but that's definitely a wave I see in the industry, not necessarily because people want to, but because they have to. They haven't saved enough. And the reality is that most people have not saved enough for retirement.
I guess the other thing too is, Donna, is healthcare costs rising. Okay, and it's unknown where they want to repeal Obamacare. We don't know where that's going. Okay, so insurance costs, maybe people worry about that. I know that's our concern. It isn't now because I'm covered with my job. But I think those, healthcare costs, you can't plan for that right now because every day it changes. They talked about the tax cut. It may hit your 401c. They said. And when I saw that, my wife has one of those. I'm like, man, we don't know what the effect that's going to be. So financially speaking, that may delay retirement for some people even more.
Yes, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty right now. So people retiring at 65 when they know they can go directly onto Medicare, that's a great deal, and they buy a supplemental policy. And I don't think they're at risk. You know, they've got that coverage.
Yet, even Medicare could be changed.
It could.
I don't think it's 65 though. That's pretty much, you know, laid in stone.
Yeah.
That shouldn't, but
Yeah.
there could be other changes. We don't know.
Well, the real problem is for people retiring before 65 where they don't have coverage during that gap. And so I've got several clients in that situation. They've retired in their mid-50s. They've been using Obamacare, or they're buying insurance on the private market, and it's a moving target. They don't know from year to year what they're going to be able to buy and what it's going to cost. And so there's a huge amount of uncertainty in that area. And you're right, they're talking about 401ks. President Trump said he's not going to allow them to be changed. I was just reading this morning that Congress is still looking at changing them. So that's up in the air.
Well, he did say that, and then they came out the next day and said that they were on the table.
Right, exactly.
And really nobody knows. I'm not blaming the president or Congress. They don't
Exactly.
really know until the devil, as
Yeah.
they say, is in the details.
Yeah, that's so true. And the tax changes that they're proposing, I mean, I'm very familiar with what they are, but they haven't released the details, and I'm waiting to see if they actually go through. But they impact my clients in a huge way. And so there is a lot of uncertainty that didn't used to be there, actually, that does impact retirees.
So you might see, we don't know yet, but let's say do you trend in your studies from a 5 to 10 year study, 10 to 15? What do you do in your business as far as studying trends for retirement? Because with all these changes, you know, you may be looking at a 5 to 8 year trend where things change, percentages change here, percentages change there.
Right.
So because there's so much uncertainty right now as far as those things go, and healthcare and taxes and 401ks, man, how important are those? So someone, as we speak right now, they don't know though, no changes have come up, but that they're being mentioned, they're probably thinking, oh man, you know, I wanted to retire here, I'm gonna have to look here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know.
Well, the trends are long, and people are looking at living to 95. For instance, if I was working with a client, this would come up quite often. We would do retirement projections that are very customized. And sometimes if I was working with someone who was already retired, they would say to me, why do I need retirement projections? I'm retired. And I said, oh no, you know, you may be 65, we're looking to 95. We're looking 30 years out. And I even have some clients where we're assuming 100 to 105, depending on the longevity in their family.
Oh man.
And
okay, yeah, because that, anyway, I'm sorry, keep going. That makes me smile. But my mother lived to 91.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you think back to our ancestors, I mean, I can talk personally, and maybe this isn't true for everyone, but my parents smoked and drank a lot. And so they died at a young age, but I don't do that. You know, I live a much healthier life. And so our generation is expected to live a much longer life than just the prior generation. And we have to plan for that. So we're looking very long term. I'm looking to stretch those dollars to at least 95 and sometimes beyond. And when they're looking at trends, they're looking long term. I would hope that this period of uncertainty that we're in right now will not continue. I'm thankful for AARP. They're going to fight for seniors. I really think it's the younger generation that we need to worry about, where Social Security may be reduced further.
Insolvent, they say by 2030, supposedly.
Yes.
There's going to have to be some major changes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, no, that's right. And 401ks are even being kind of trimmed back sometimes for younger generations. So you take, for example, Sandia Labs. Well, the people retiring in the past or retiring now, they've got pensions just like government employees, but the younger workers for the past, I think it's like 15 years, the pensions are gone. So they phased them out, and those folks have 401ks, and so the onus is put on them to do their saving for retirement. They'll still have Social Security, but that may also be reduced. So there's more risk for the younger generations than there are for people our age and those getting ready for retirement.
No, that's an interesting, you know, again, my wife and I plan to retire, you know, sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know, and I can't tell you that I'll ever retire permanently, because I do some part-time broadcast work on the side, and nothing big, nothing just here. But I think for the younger generation, as you mentioned, Social Security's always been kind of, you know, even President Bush wanted to see if he could make it an investment thing, and that, you know, that didn't really take off. And, you know, you mentioned Social Security, people understandably get a little, you know, because some people, that's all, you know, seniors that I work with at Manzano, Mesa Multi-Generational Center,
oh, sure, they
live
rely
on that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why what we do as, you know, in the meals and things like that, is so important.
Right.
Because that might be the only food. I always say this to my staff, look, you're coming here for meals. This might be the food they get Monday through Friday, breakfast and lunch, dinner, I don't know. And they might have to choose between that and medication. Boy, it just breaks my heart when I hear that. It really does.
That's the reality.
Right.
When I look at my clients, I tell people the world, that even the U.S. is not like my clients. My clients are super responsible. They've been saving for many years and investing wisely, and I call them the middle-class millionaires. And that's a lot of people, but the majority have not had that luxury of saving. And they, like you said, they have to choose between buying their medication and buying groceries often. And so it's a much different situation. And I'm also very careful when we're talking about finances, and I'm used to, I'm around people who do save. They use every opportunity to save. They live within their means. I have to be aware that the majority of people are not in that situation. And I really think it's not their fault. They shouldn't beat themselves up about it, but I'm aware that most people are not as financially stable as you and your wife and everybody that I work with. And I really think it often goes back to the way we learned in our childhood. Mm-hmm. So if you think back to what your parents said to you when you were this tall, and your grandparents and how they treated money, if I look back, my dad was always saying, save for a rainy day, and my grandmother saved for our college, so my sister and I could go to college. Really? And be the first in our family to attend college.
Banks, I'm sure all the coins went in there. Back you don't see those anymore.
No investments, strictly a bank, yeah. Right. And so I got that kind of an upbringing, and it definitely had a huge impact on me. But many people that I talk with didn't have that upbringing, and so they never learned how to save. And they get to the end of the month and they say, there is nothing left. I mean, I don't know how to even start saving because I never learned to save. I never saw this in action. And so those are the people I really worry about, because they reach retirement age and have not saved. Okay, so that's an interesting concept. You think that everyone does know how, and it shouldn't be hard to just go over there and deposit your check and check in, you have a savings account. You're right though, some people don't know how to do that. For me, my father grew up in the Depression. He grew up as a member of 10. They had 10 in their family. Wow. So my father was, and I'd say this with the most love and affection, was a skinflint. He really was. He provided for his family. He worked hard. He sent us to private school on not making much. He did. But we weren't going to eat out a lot. We were going to go to a vacation. He bought the cheapest beer that he could. And again, I say these things with much affection. Yeah. That was my father. I still remember my uncles would play cards, and I'd ask my dad one time, I said, hey, how come you don't play? Well, I don't want to lose my money. So to this day, that's stuck in me about gambling. That's me though. Somebody else has a different philosophy. I'm not knocking them. Yeah. I'm just saying, you asked about how parents were, and my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they did what they could, what they had. They invested in my brother, my sister, and I. Yeah. That was their priorities. And those are really strong money messages, I call them, from our childhood. So you had them, I had them. We were very fortunate. As a result, we learned how to save and save for the future. What are some of the most common questions your clients ask? I mean, and without revealing any confidentiality, but is there any more common questions you're asked by your clients about retirement? Anything that rings true to you or stands out more than the other? Well, I think they do worry about healthcare costs because that's such an unknown. They worry about losing their good health. And I see that so often. That's why I say you've got to make health your #1 priority. They actually ask me a lot of questions about their kids because they're worried about their kids starting off on the wrong track with credit card debt and not understanding how to save for the future. And that whole message about the Depression is being lost. So, we didn't experience it, our parents did, our kids are not experiencing it. And I tell my clients, make sure you talk to your kids and your grandkids. You want to give them strong money messages. You want to be a role model, and you don't want those family stories that you just shared to be lost. Oh, yeah. You want to pass them along, even if the kids are teenagers and they're rolling their eyes. It's sinking in, and they're starting to understand how you became financially secure so that you could consider retiring at 57. I mean, that's like pie in the sky for many people. It's wonderful, but they need to learn how to do that too. And so I tell my clients, talk to the kids, talk to the grandkids, pass along these strong money messages. And mostly they're concerned about the future, they're concerned about their health, they're concerned about the costs that we may not be building into the retirement projections. But again, having that pension is really valuable, and then you add it to Social Security and then the 403B or the 401K. Those are really solid foundations for getting you through a long, happy retirement.
I think the other thing is too, is as far as retirement, any retirement is unexpected financial calamities. You might have a house flooded, you might have a car break down. You don't know, the unexpected. So I think one of the things you mentioned, and you say this here too, the best way to prepare for retirement is start saving at a young age. Unfortunately, some of us live, and it's okay, right? We're all different. I may save different than you. My wife my wife handles all the finances. Not that I'm a bad keeper of them. She just knows more about it
She's just really good
than
at
me. I'm not a big, huge spender on things, but we like decent things, but I'm not going to go extravagant. What for? That's me though. Somebody else may want to do that. Yeah. But I think one of the things that you say that too is here, start saving young. And it's hard to tell young kids that because these millennials, man, they are different. And I love kids. I work with kids at this, Manzano, Mesa. I love kids. And their thought processes, I work with a lot of young kids who work with our after school program, and they're in college. Some of the things they'll say, and I'll laugh. I'll like, all right, okay, I'll come back to you, Mel, and ask you why you think that in 3 months. Yeah. Because I challenge them. Yeah. I want to know why they think what they think. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. There's some good, and active, engaging dialogue every single day. Every day I see them. I would talk to every one of them. Yeah. Because I want to know what their thoughts are.
And that's great.
Yeah.
They need that from our generation. The things with kids is that, first of all, when I was growing up, I didn't have credit cards. When I went to school, I didn't have a credit card. My dad told me to keep an extra $20 bill hidden in my purse in case I had an emergency. And I always did that.
Interesting. You didn't forget that.
I did not forget that, but I didn't have a credit card. The kids now, they have credit cards at a young age. They have cell phones, which we never had. That's
everything else too.
That's a new budget item. So many expenses. Technology is expensive, and the credit cards are devastating. So one of the things I mentioned in that article, in terms of start saving young, that's important. But in the stages article, from ages 3 to 9, when we're working with really young children, I tell parents, don't use credit cards all the time. That's teaching them immediate gratification, and use cash. Use cash at the grocery store, use cash in the restaurants. We need to get our young people away from thinking you pay for everything with a credit card, you pay for it later, and if you don't have the money, you just stretch it out another 3 years.
Interest, the whole thing builds up.
Oh,
bills,
yeah, that's
40,
devastating.
50,000.
And that didn't happen when we were young.
Financially cripple you.
Yes, and so credit card debt is really serious, and that's something we need to teach our kids to avoid. And then saving at a young age, trying to get them to save just 5% so they start to realize how powerful it is, and then it grows to 10, and then they kick it into 15. It's a matter of setting it aside, paying yourself first, and then you don't have to worry about having it left at the end of the month.
Some people are, too, Donna, let's be honest, are very good about saving things, investing and turning it over. And so it can be done by people that are very just, nose to the grindstone as far as seeing their investments grow and their portfolio grow and the whole thing. There are people that are very, very, turn it over to millions to billions.
Right.
And so it'd be nice to take a page out of their book, but just so many people want that vacation, they want that new car, they want, again, we talk about technology, it's texting right now.
Yeah,
what is it? I always ask the kids, what is it in 10, 15 years? What do you got then? Because trends are different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to, sometimes talk to kids, you're like, hey, get off your phone, look up. There's humans, there's humans in the room.
Yes, yes.
So
put the phone down.
I always ask the kids too. I'll say, hey, when you guys have kids, I wonder what it's going to be like. Yeah. Because it's not going to be this. It's going to be something different, right? Yeah. Something more new age, more. Yeah. But again, more paralyzing as far as communicative. Yeah. Communication.
Well, there's also things happening financially. We had the financial crisis of 2008, and the kids that were teenagers at that point and watched their parents go through that, because that was pretty frightening. They watched their 401ks drop to 50%.
Right.
They watched their houses go underwater. People got into real financial dire straits. And so that had an impact on teenagers, which my kids were teenagers at that time. And they are finding that millennials are actually very conservative. So yes, they are taught to expect immediate gratification in terms of a credit card, but they're also understanding the danger to that. And the exciting thing is that millennials are opening more Roth IRAs than any other generation.
That's excellent. I'm going to have to cut you off there, Donna. We're just about done.
Okay.
Donna, Skeels, Cygan.
Cygan.
Cygan. Preparing psychologically for retirement. Anything else any number, anything else you want to give out to the audience?
Well, they can find my articles and lots of educational material that's all free on my website, which is www.joyofinancialsecurity.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We could probably go on another 2 hours. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.